The Private Label Pod with your host Paul Mooney, brought to you by Private Label People.
You just listen and leave the rest up to us.
Welcome to the Private Label Pod, episode 11. I am Paul Mooney. Today we held Robert Rickey accountable. I'm only joking, but we did sit down with Robert to talk about accountability. And who better to talk about it?
Get involved, have your say, ask us a question, or leave us a voice message by heading on over to privatelabelpeople.com/podcast.
Robert, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good, dude. What about yourself?
I'm doing good. I've got a little bit of a cold, so that's probably going to be coming through loud and clear to people. They'll think I'm sounding a bit...
Or not so loud and clear?
about as clear as I always do, but a little bit more hushed, if you like. Smooth like your head. You've just been to the barbers, I notice.
I have indeed. I had a little bit of a spruce up in time for a break. I'm heading off for a week to get away from the horrible weather that we currently have, and the dark mornings and the dark late afternoons, which have not been doing my mood the best of late. But hey, what else is there for it?
Well, thanks for rubbing it in.
Yeah.
Is there room in your suitcase?
No, there won't be. There is, but you're not coming.
A friend of mine used to take a huge suitcase on holiday with him. It was one of the biggest suitcases you could ever find. And you'd be going away for like 2 days, and I would go, why is he bringing the world's biggest suitcase on holiday? And then I realised it was because he used to pack it with duty-free cigarettes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was genius.
Look, this is definitely something that we always discuss is private label business, but business in general. Maybe he had his own sort of private label business, ripping off Marlboro, Regal, and Lambert and Butler.
Other tobacco products available.
Yes.
Made that mistake with Google last week, and they've been in contact, so this might be my last podcast.
Why were they looking to buy some fags off you? Sorry, I mean off your friend, in inverted commas, who had a really large suitcase.
Incoming royalties, definitely. Yes, we're going to talk today about accountability. Mm-hmm. What is the meaning of accountability? Where would you start with that?
Well, I suppose being accountable, I'll get that out of the road, but I think we've definitely seen it, especially whenever you have people who are, let's call it new to business. They're startups, they're newbie entrepreneurs, all of those different things that you could call somebody, but generally a startup. And with a startup normally comes somebody who's working full-time in another job, or maybe part-time in another job, or is maybe retired from another job. Those sorts of scenarios would definitely occur. And because of those things, it can lead into a lack of accountability. Because I understand whenever somebody's doing a 9 to 5, maybe they've got kids, younger kids like yourself, Paul, and you get back from work, you're relatively tired, you're putting some dinner on, you're getting them sorted with homework, you're getting them ready for bed, all of those different things, and the evening sort of, just flies away, and all of a sudden it's 9 or 10 o'clock and you're exhausted. I get it. And we then start procrastinating. We start putting things off. And then whenever we're listening to podcasts such as this, or reading booklets from life coaches or all this stuff, and their one and only example to make it all better is just get up early. It's like, right, that is a bit of a one-size-fits-all kind of approach. Some people can't do that. Some people are not early risers. They're not catching the worms. Some people are a wee bit more, burning the midnight oil. They'll stay up a little bit later. So that one size approach for me just doesn't cut it. And also, some people, whenever they do get up early, are getting their kids ready for school, or if they do that, then they're going to absolutely exhaust themselves throughout the rest of the day. So I think whenever we kind of look at accountability, I start taking it into the urgent pieces. Like, starting to prioritize what you have to do. If that is inside the likes of our private label businesses, then looking down a list of tasks and saying, right, look, what is priority number one that I have no option but to get this done, or another way is done for me, but it has to be done this week. It has to be completed. What's priority number 2, 3, 4, and so on. So you asked what accountability was. I gave you quite a bit of background into a lot of different things there, but that's kind of what I mean by it whenever we're addressing it, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that gets mentioned when you talk about accountability is expectation. And when you're accountable, you're not just accountable to yourself, but it can be family, as you've mentioned. It can be your other half, and it can be your kids and everything else. And I suppose, a lot of our members, a lot of people who are starting a private label business, they have those worries also. It's not just, can I make a success of this, me personally, and what does that success look like? But they might have a wife who's saying, well, you're going to invest a lot of money here. How do you know it's going to work? You've really got kids who are obviously expensive, as you well know, and I know very well too. How does that add a lot of pressure? Did you ever feel that it added a lot of pressure whenever you were starting off as a private label seller?
I think it certainly adds pressure, and I think it adds more pressure whenever we don't acknowledge it. Because actually, whenever we're looking at the accountability factor there, that should be the first priority. So whenever we're looking at this and saying, should I be researching my next product, or should I be getting on to doing my reporting? Is that priority number 1? No, it's getting the kids to school. Right? But if we're not measuring it, then those things like getting the kids to school, making sure to spend time with your wife or your husband, partner, or things like that, or getting the kids dinner, they have to come in front of these other things. So they should be priority 1, 2, 3, 4. And then doing that research or doing that reporting comes in at number 5. Because then what happens is whenever you have that accountability of, and it sounds weird, but I will get the kids up for school. Well, we achieve that every single day whenever we do it. And that can be a nice tick mark. And that then lets us see what we would talk about quite regularly, and I know we've covered it before on another episode, is that idea of the book, The Gap in the Gain. And that's what we've been putting out to a lot of our members over the last few weeks, about going back over that book and rereading. Because then what it does is it starts to create gain thinking. It starts to actually get tick marks beside things that you should do, rather than just ignoring them. They are more important than the other things. But whenever you start ticking them and saying, yes, the kids got out for school today, it might have been not exactly on time, or they might have forgot a school bag like we were speaking about a number of weeks ago.
Dear.
But we did it. We got there. It's a tick. And ticks then create more ticks as we go down, and we become more and more accountable then.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're talking about ticks, and really what we try to do for the members within private label people, and what you guys try and do is try and tick as many boxes as possible and try to make things as easy for them as possible. But a big part of accountability, again, seems to be feedback. So for us to be accountable to our members, we require their feedback. So we need that coming through on a consistent basis. And we have a lot of guys who are good at that, and good at giving us that. But you sometimes notice that, for instance, I like to do reach out to people, and sometimes I don't hear back. And we're trying to genuinely help. How much do you feel you can learn from somebody in regards to the amount of feedback that they give you? Do you look at someone who's given constant feedback through maybe the circle group that we have? Do you look at them and say, you have a good chance of being more successful here because I can tell how engaged you are, than perhaps somebody who is very low flying, doesn't say a lot? And I get that there's other people who do well and don't maybe feed into that also and don't give that feedback. But do you think it's really important that people are visually and verbally giving you the feedback that they need you to give?
Yeah, there's 9 times out of 10 there's a connection. And there's a big connection. And sure, it is horses for courses, as you said. Sometimes there are those people that fly under the radar that you mentioned, and they're just getting on with what they do, and you very rarely speak to them. And then whenever you speak to them 3 or 6 months later, it's, you've done all this. That's great. They're they're generally like self-starter, I guess, is what people would kind of call them, and they're pretty dedicated, pretty committed, but they just get on with it. They're not sort of, like we're talking about kids, like show and tell, that they do in school. They're not that way inclined. But there's definitely a relationship. Whenever I see a number of people, and I can think of them right off the top of my head, in that they're always at a stream, or they're always picking up a recording, they're always asking questions. They are finding something within a stream or a video or a post that they have a question on. That should be absolutely everybody. Right? There has to be, or sorry, I'll go the other way. It would be very unlikely for a person out there inside our group to watch a stream or a 1 hour video or read down through a post and understand it 100%, absolutely everything. So therefore what that tells me is you're going down through, you're understanding a certain portion of it, and there's a missing piece there that's not getting you to ask the question. And we always like to have many different places where you can ask that. So let's try and get over some of the obstacles that we know. And of course, we have known knowns and we have known unknowns. One of those would be shyness. Maybe some person does not want to post in something because they think that it's silly. They think that it's a silly question. We get that all the time. I say there's no silly questions, as in ask away. Even if you think they're silly, don't worry about it. Just ask it and we'll get it answered. Or send an instant message to somebody. And even start it with, I feel a bit stupid asking this. However, here is the question. Or send an email, right? Or make it anonymous. Just get it answered whichever way is possible. As we talk about that whole thing of suffering in silence, I hate that. I mean, if there's one thing that I do hate, it's that. And if there's one thing that I could wave a magic wand and get it fixed, it would certainly be that, Paul.
Yeah, well, again, it comes down a little bit of what you're speaking about there. It's speaking out, isn't it? And it's communication, which again, when you look into accountability, that's one of the words that comes up. You're obviously a good communicator and you have been for a long time. Was that something you feel that you were natural to, or was it something that you learned through watching others do it? Or
yeah, I think it's probably the latter, seeing other people doing it, and I guess sort of like having the stones to go and have a bit of confidence and be shot down, like going to the likes of exhibits or trade shows and just take the bull by the horns and go and do it. And almost in a way, go over to and ask a question of somebody who you're unlikely to ever have a relationship with in business sense ever again, right? So that it doesn't actually matter. Just go and do it, ask the question, have the expectation that you're going to make a complete and utter horlicks of it, as we would say here, which is a complete mess of it. And then if you've got that expectation going in, well, then anything other than that is a bonus. And the second time you do it, you will be better. You will still probably be absolutely rubbish at it, but you'll be better and better and better. And then you start to see more of the gains and less of the gaps. So it comes right back around to that again.
Well, to use a word, obviously you're going to Lanzarote, I think, on holiday.
Yeah, thanks for telling everybody. So
Yeah,
now,
do
you want to tell them where I'm staying?
Well, I was going to say, to do what you've just described and going over to somebody and starting a conversation with somebody they've never met before, that can take a big set of cojones, as they would say.
Yeah.
So you can see where I'm going. But to some people, that's their worst nightmare. But not for you. You're quite comfortable with doing that.
Yeah, I would say to people too, go and practice it. I think as well, there's one thing that I'm sure you can appreciate, that being from Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland being quite a small place, Belfast being a city, I mean, it's big to us, but in city terms, it's relatively small. People walk around with their head up, and we actually acknowledge complete and utter strangers. And whenever we've got, foreign guests coming over, it's almost alien to them that we do that. We have that sort of tick of the head, which basically means, what about you, or how you doing? And we say these things to strangers. So I would, challenge everybody to harness their inner Northern Irish person and just as you're walking past somebody on the street today, say hello, how you doing, and watch them think that you're some sort of mad, crazy, axe-wielding murderer.
That's it. Nothing to fear. Just to finish off, lastly, we talk about accountability. And is there a time in your life where you remember being held accountable for the first time in your life, like a first bill, or was it a first, like my eldest daughter's doing her A-levels at the moment, which is her senior exams here in school, and you can see that accountability starting to really sit with her. Was it something like that, like an exam, or?
No, the one that strikes to mind was a credit card, and I didn't really hold myself accountable in school, and probably why I didn't do that well at school.
Well, after hearing your story last episode, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, that was particularly fantastic. I'd like to hold myself accountable and go back to that moment. But yeah, whenever I left school, got a job, it was like a couple of months later, it was, something came through the post, credit card. It was like free money. I was 18 and I applied, got this credit card, and there was like a £400 limit on it, which was actually my first salary. So it was a month's salary of credit limit, and I decimated that on absolute nonsense. And then the bill came through, and it was like, oh, I have to pay this back. And it almost felt like you were having to pay it back twice, and there was no way that I was going to be able to pay that month's salary back quickly. And boy, did they hold me accountable. It didn't end well, but it ended eventually. I had to be held accountable, and thanks very much, Barclaycard, for that life lesson.
Yeah, well, I'm in a similar position myself, and it was my dad that opened the letter.
I was going to say it was your dad's credit card. That would be even better.
That would be better.
Dad, I'm going to hold you to some accountability here.
Well, yeah, you're nobody better to hold you accountable than your dad.
Get involved, have your say, ask us a question, or leave us a voice message by heading on over to privatelabelpeople.com/podcast.
Thank you, folks. It's nice to hear that it's not just us little people that struggle with accountability, but very interesting to hear Robert talk about some of the solutions that he's found over the years to help him with being accountable. Join us next time when we will be speaking to Emily Kineski on her journey to private label selling.